Hello, scholars. Welcome to the UMS Literacy Interim 1 assessment. Please write your name, today's date, and advisory on the front of your packet. When you are done, continue on listening to the video. Directions. Read the story and answer the questions that follow. Departure by Sherwood Anderson. Young George Willard got out of bed at 4 in the morning. It was April and the young tree leaves were just coming out of their buds. The trees along the residence streets in Winesburg are maple and the seeds are winged. When the wind blows, they whirl crazily about, filling the air and making a carpet underfoot. Pause the video and write a mini main idea. When you are done, hit play. George came downstairs into the hotel office carrying a brown leather bag. His trunk was packed for departure. Since 2 o'clock, he had been awake thinking of his journey he was about to take and wondering what he would find at the end of his journey. The boy who slept in the hotel office lay on a cot by the door. His mouth was open and he snored lustily. George crept past the cot and went out into the silent, deserted Main Street. The east was pink with the dawn, and long streaks of light climbed into the sky, where a few stars still shone. Press pause and write a mini main idea. When you are done, hit play. Beyond the last house on Trunion Pike in Winesburg, there is a great stretch of open fields. The fields are owned by farmers who live in town and drive homeward at evening along Trunion Pike in light creaking wagons. In the fields are planted berries and small fruits. In the late afternoon, in the hot summers, when the road and the fields are covered with dust, a smoky haze lies over the great flat basin of land. To look across it is like looking out across the sea. In the spring, when the land is green, the effect is somewhat different. The land becomes a wide, green billiard table on which tiny human insects toil up and down. Press pause and write a mini main idea. When you are done, hit play. All through his boyhood and young manhood, George Willard had been in the habit of walking on Trunion Pike. He had been in the midst of the great open place on winter nights when it was covered with snow and only the moon looked down at him. He had been there in the fall when bleak winds blew and on summer evenings when the air vibrated with the song of insects. On the April morning, he wanted to go there again, to walk again in the silence. He did not walk to where the road dipped down by a little stream 2 miles from town, and then turned and walked silently back. When he got to Main Street, clerks were sweeping the sidewalks before the stores. "Hey, you, George. How does it feel to be going away?" they asked. Pause and write a mini main idea. The westbound train leaves Winesburg at 7:45 in the morning. Tom Little is conductor. His train runs from Cleveland to where it connects with a great trunk line railroad with terminals in Chicago and New York. Tom has what in railroad circles is called an easy run. Every evening he returns to his family. In the fall and spring he spends his Sundays fishing at Lake Erie. He has a round red face and small blue eyes. He knows the people in the towns along his railroad better than a city man knows the people who live in his apartment building. Pause, write a mini main idea. George came down in the little incline from the new Willard house at 7 o'clock. Tom Willard carried his bag. The son had become taller than the father. Pause, write a mini main idea. On the station platform, everyone shook the young man's hand. More than a dozen people waited about. Then they talked of their own affairs. Even Will Henderson, who was lazy and often slept until 9, had got out of bed. George was embarrassed. Gertrude Wilmot, a tall, thin woman of 50, who worked in the Winesburg post office, came along the station platform. She had never before paid any attention to George. Now she stopped and put out her hand. In 2 words, she voiced what everyone felt. "Good luck," she said sharply, and then turning went on her way. Pause, write a mini main idea. When the train came into the station, George felt relieved. He scampered hurriedly aboard. Helen White came running along Main Street, hoping to have a parting word with him, but he had found a seat and did not see her. When the train started, Tom Little punched his ticket, grinned, and although he knew George well and knew on what adventure he was just setting out, made no comment. Tom had seen 1,000 George Willards go out of their towns to the city. It was a commonplace enough incident with him. In the car, there was a man who had just invited Tom to go on a fishing trip in Sandusky Bay. He wanted to accept the invitation and talk over details. Pause. Write a mini main idea. George glanced up and down the car to be sure no one was looking, then took out his pocketbook and counted his money. His mind was occupied with a desire not to appear green. Almost the last words his father had said to him concerned the matter of his behavior when he got to the city. Be a sharp one, Tom Willard had said. Keep your eyes on your money. Be awake. That's the ticket. Don't let anyone think you're a greenhorn. Pause. Write a mini main idea. After George counted his money, he looked out of the window and was surprised to see that the train was still in Winesburg. The young man going out of town to meet the adventure of life began to think, but he did not think of anything very big or dramatic. Pause. Write a mini main idea of paragraphs 10 and 11. He thought of little things. Turk Smollett wheeling boards through the main street of his town in the morning. Butch Wheeler, the lamplighter of Winesburg, hurrying through the streets on a summer evening and holding a torch in his hand. Helen White, standing by a window in the Winesburg post office and putting a stamp on an envelope. Pause. Write a mini main idea. The young man's mind was carried away by his growing passion for dreams. One looking at him would not have thought him particularly sharp. With the recollection of little things occupying his mind, he closed his eyes and leaned back in the car seat. He stayed that way for a long time, and when he aroused himself and again looked out of the car window, the town of Winesburg had disappeared and his life there had become but a background on which to paint the dreams of his manhood. At this time, you will fill out number 1 and write the main idea of the text. Please pause this video. Now we will move on to the multiple choice questions. I will read the question to you. After I have read the question and answer choices, please pause the video to give yourself time to go back to the text and answer the questions effectively. Number 2. How does paragraph 7 develop the story? A. It emphasizes how excited the townspeople are for George. B. It illustrates how unusual George's journey is for the people of the town. C. It demonstrates the effect of the early morning travel. D. It clarifies the father and son's emotions. Number 3. Select the detail from the text that best supports your answer to question 2. A. On the station platform, everyone shook the young man's hand. B. George was embarrassed. C. In 2 words, she voiced what everyone felt. D. Then they talked of their own affairs. Number 4. Why does the author include the train conductor's perspective in paragraph 8? A. To foreshadow how the journey will go. B. To introduce a new character. C. To provide a contrast. D. To demonstrate how unusual the town is. Number 5. Which detail from the text best reveals George's attitude toward the trip? A. The young man's mind was carried away by his growing passion for dreams. B. He looked out the window and was surprised to see that the train was still in Winesburg. C. Young George Willard got out of bed at 4 in the morning. D. Since 2 o'clock, he had been awake thinking of the journey he was about to take. Number 6. What is the significance of the word crept in paragraph 2? A. It emphasizes that George was respectful. B. It reveals that George is trying to be sneaky. C. It underscores the time of day. D. It creates a mood of suspense. Number 7. What is the most likely reason George's father gives him advice in paragraph 9? A. The father loves his son and will miss him. B. The father wants to be sure his son makes him proud. C. The father remembers that his son has a tendency to be forgetful. D. The father knows that his son has never done anything like the journey before. Number 8. How does the author's use of description help the reader understand George's choice to leave? Use evidence from the passage to support your response. Please pause the video and write your response. Directions. Read the article and answer the questions that follow. The Great Pumpkin by Brendan Burrell. Quinn Werner's backyard pumpkin patch overlooks a wooded creek. In the winter, when the maples and oaks stand like toothpicks and snow coats the western Pennsylvania valley, Werner gazes out his kitchen window and caresses his prize-winning seeds. The topsoil is frozen solid, and his orange tractor sits unused in the garage. He is not a big talker, but every Thursday his buddy Dave Steltz phones him, and their conversation always comes back to springtime, to the pumpkin patch and the way off. Pause and write a mini main idea. In April, Werner germinates his seeds, each one as long as a quarter, by soaking them in a mix of hydrogen peroxide and water. He pots them and incubates them in a cooler with heating pads. He then places the seedlings under fluorescent lights upstairs in what he calls his pumpkin room. On nice days, he takes the little pots outside for an hour or two for fresh air and natural sunlight. In May, every seedling is planted in the patch under its own clear plastic tent fitted with incandescent bulbs that are switched on during chilly nights. Pause, write a mini main idea. Within weeks, the vines stretch out from underneath the plastic like octopus arms. In June, when the first golden trumpets of female flowers begin to open, Werner pollinates them by brushing them with pollen-covered stamens from select male flowers. Then he covers them with plastic cups to prevent honeybees from meddling. Pause, write a mini main idea. When I visited Werner's property on a sweltering summer afternoon, he was checking his patch for the third time that day. Werner straddled the orange mesh fence that surrounds his garden and waded through a sea of stiff, broad leaves toward a thigh-high dome covered by an old bedsheet. Pause, write a mini main idea. His 12 pumpkins had been growing for less than a month, so I expected that one would be small enough to hoist into the back seat of a car. Werner whipped off the sheet, and there sat a shiny pale pumpkin. They turn orange later in the year. That seemed to sag on one side, like a mound of silly putty left out in the sun. Based on its circumference, he guessed it was pushing 400 pounds, 180 kilograms, and the season had just begun. Pause and write a mini main idea. Werner beamed. "It's real long and wide," he said. "It's in really good shape." But as he leaned in closer, running his hand along the smooth ridge, his face grew taut. "Oh man, as a matter of fact, it's split." Pause, write a mini main idea. Tucked into the blossom end of the pumpkin was a tiny crack. Even if the crack wasn't enough to disqualify the fruit from competition, and it was, it could widen and let in bacteria that could quickly rot the pumpkin from the inside. "That makes me sick," he said. "This is the reason why I grow so many." Pause, write a mini main idea. Werner and his pal David Steltz are competitive gardeners who vie for bragging rights and prize money ranging from a few hundred to thousands of dollars. Their crop of choice is the Atlantic giant pumpkin. A freak of nature is intensive breeding. During peak growing season, these pumpkins can gain 50 pounds, 23 kilograms per day, which is sometimes too much. The cracked pumpkin Werner showed me had swollen too quickly after a hard rain. In general, he has kept about 2/3 of his colossal gourds intact. In 2008, he earned the title of Grower of the Year. After trucking pumpkins to 6 weigh-offs and winning 5, his pumpkins had an average weight of nearly 1,500 pounds, 680 kilograms. I lost by 2 pounds in the 6th, he says. Pause and write a mini main idea. Since the 1980s, giant pumpkins have tripled in size, thanks to strategic breeding and hardcore growers with time on their hands and dirt under their fingernails. From April to October, Werner spends 6 to 8 hours per day tending his garden. Thomas Andres, a squash expert who works at the New York Botanical Gardens, has predicted that the first pumpkin weighing 1 ton, 2,000 pounds, or 900 kilograms will appear in 2014. Pause and write a mini main idea. The Ohio Valley Contest, Werner's local weigh-off, is one of the more than 80 competitions in the Great Pumpkin Belt, an area that stretches across North America from Washington State to Nova Scotia. This is prime pumpkin territory. The region has 90 to 120 frost-free summer days, but is cold enough in winter to keep plant disease and pest in check. The weigh-offs are friendly competitions, but they're also a form of at-home science. Growers meticulously graph their pumpkins' growth curves and share successes and failures, and seeds with their peers. Pause, write a mini main idea. By God, if we can get a pumpkin up to a ton, imagine what we can do with somebody's vegetable crop, says Steltz, president of the Great Pumpkin Commonwealth. What we are doing will be reflected on the dinner table of America. What is the main idea of the text? At this time, pause the video and write your main idea for the text. Number 9. Which idea is introduced in paragraph 1? A. Werner is focused on his hobby throughout the year. B. Werner believes that cooperation is the key to success. C. Werner's seeds are sought after by other growers. D. Werner's location has contributed to his success. Number 10. Read this sentence from lines 16 and 17. Then he covers them with plastic cups to prevent honeybees from meddling. The author uses the word meddling in line 17 to suggest that honeybees, A, are sensitive to cooler temperatures, B, will cause problems in the garden, C, will leave the garden quickly, D, are attracted to light sources. Number 11. How does paragraph 12 reflect a central idea of the article? A, by explaining some of the challenges faced by pumpkin growers. B, by explaining why some pumpkin growers have the time to breed pumpkins. C, by connecting the efforts of pumpkin growers to the size of giant pumpkins. D, by showing the recognition that pumpkin growers get for their efforts. Number 12. Which evidence from the text suggests that Werner's hobby is popular? A, giant pumpkins have tripled in size since the 1980s. B, competitions can earn gardeners thousands of dollars. C, experts predict that a 1-ton pumpkin will be grown soon. Or D, there are more than 80 competitions held in a particular area. Number 13. Paragraph 13 generates interest in the topic of great pumpkin growing by A, providing detailed descriptions of the weigh-off. B, describing challenges that growers must overcome. C, mentioning that people can achieve similar results themselves. D, suggesting that consumers can benefit from these friendly competitions. Number 14. Which statement would be most important to include in a summary of the article? A, growing giant pumpkins requires a combination of time and skill. B, giant pumpkins grow best in regions that have changing seasons. C, Giant pumpkin weigh-offs generally take place in the spring. D. Growing giant pumpkins requires a background in science. Scholars, at this time, go back through the text, double-check your responses, make sure your main ideas are thorough, and meet all of the requirements. If you need to, you can rewind to any part in this video to go over something again.